Imagine a courtroom. But not just any courtroom. This is the courtroom of heaven. The air is thick with tension, every sound echoing in the silence. In the center stands the accused, not a hardened criminal, but a broken man named Joshua. His head is bowed, his garments filthy, stained to the core. He offers no defense, his silence confesses his guilt. To his right stands the prosecutor, Satan the great accuser, relentless, cold, and eager for condemnation. Satan's list of charges is long and damning, every failure exposed. The judge is the Lord God Almighty, presiding in silent authority. This is the ultimate trial, where destinies are decided and every secret is brought to light. There are no shadows here, no place to hide. Joshua stands, waiting for the inevitable sentence. Satan's goal is not justice, but utter destruction. The stakes could not be higher. A man's soul, identity, and future hang in the balance. This is the vision shown to the prophet Zechariah, a story that echoes our deepest fears. We all know what it's like to stand accused, to feel the weight of our own failures. In this heavenly courtroom, every flaw is exposed. The silence is heavy, the outcome seemingly certain. But what happens next will change everything. This is not just Joshua's story, it's ours. The verdict here will speak to every heart that has ever known shame. And the outcome is more surprising than anyone could imagine. Let's look closer at this drama. Joshua, the high priest, stands as the spiritual leader of Israel, meant to embody purity, yet covered in filth. His garments aren't just dirty, they're defiled, symbolizing the nation's unfaithfulness and shame. Israel's sins, idolatry, rebellion, brokenness, cling to him for all to see. At his side, Satan, the accuser, points to every stain. Satan's case is strong. He doesn't invent lies, he exposes real failures. Look at this man, Satan insists. He is unworthy, unfit to stand here. The accusations are relentless, echoing the voice we all know, the one that reminds us of our worst moments. You're not good enough. You're disqualified. You have no right to stand before God. Joshua's silence is telling. He cannot deny the charges. The evidence is on him, plain for all to see. Satan's argument is simple. Joshua is guilty, and the law demands his rejection. The case seems open and shut. But this scene is more than a legal drama. It's a mirror for every soul who has ever felt unworthy. We all wear our own filthy garments, haunted by the voice of accusation. The courtroom is set, the charges are real, and the outcome appears hopeless. Yet, even as the accuser presses in, something unexpected is about to happen. This is the turning point, not just for Joshua, but for anyone who has ever stood condemned. The story is about to shift from accusation to something far greater. In this moment, the fate of the accused, and of all who identify with him, hangs in the balance. The next word spoken will change everything. The accuser's voice is loud, but it will not have the final say. The judge is about to speak. Joshua's filthy garments aren't just a wardrobe issue, they're a spiritual crisis. In the Old Testament, clothing symbolized identity and status. The high priest's robes were meant to reflect holiness, but Joshua's are stained with the nation's sin. Every mark is a reminder of broken commandments and broken relationship with God. He stands in the holiest place, utterly defiled, unable to fulfill his calling. The filth is more than surface deep. It's the evidence of spiritual bankruptcy. Imagine trying to enter a pristine palace covered in mud. You'd be stopped at the gate. That's Joshua's predicament, magnified to a cosmic scale. Satan's accusation isn't about fashion, it's a theological argument. Sin disqualifies us. And by the law, he's right. A holy God cannot coexist with sin. Joshua's garments prove his guilt, and the evidence is undeniable. The situation seems hopeless. The law demands purity, and Joshua has none. This is the heart of the human problem. We are stained, unable to make ourselves clean. The accuser's case is airtight, but the story doesn't end with condemnation. The courtroom is silent, the weight of guilt crushing. Yet, in this silence, a new possibility is about to break through. The law exposes our need, but grace is waiting in the wings. Joshua's story is about to take a dramatic turn. The hopelessness of the moment sets the stage for an act of unexpected mercy. The next move belongs to God. What makes Satan's accusations so devastating is that they're often true. He doesn't need to invent lies. The evidence of failure is real. Israel's history is stained with rebellion, idolatry, and injustice. Joshua, as high priest, carries the weight of generations of sin. Satan points to real events, real guilt, reminding Joshua of every failure. The accuser's voice echoes in our own lives, replaying our worst moments. You are a failure. You are unworthy. You will never change. The accusations sting because deep down, we know our own hearts. We know the shame, the regret, the secret struggles. When Satan accuses, he holds up a mirror to our brokenness. Joshua stands silent, unable to defend himself. The evidence is overwhelming, the guilt undeniable. This is the crushing weight of truth, when our failures are exposed and we have no answer. The courtroom is silent, the verdict seemingly certain. But even when the truth condemns us, God is not finished. The silence is about to be broken, not by more accusation, but by a word of hope. The judge is about to intervene. The story is not over. Grace is about to speak. Just as the case seems lost, God intervenes. The angel of the Lord turns to Satan, not to debate, but to rebuke. "The Lord rebuke you, Satan," he declares. God doesn't argue the evidence. He silences the accuser. The basis for God's defense isn't Joshua's innocence, but God's own choice. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. God's choice overrules the accuser's condemnation. Then, God uses a striking image. Is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire? Joshua and Israel were nearly consumed by judgment, but God rescued them. The focus shifts from Joshua's failure to God's mercy. God acknowledges the fire, but declares his rescue more powerful than the destruction. The accuser is silenced, not by legal argument, but by sovereign grace. God's voice reframes the entire scene. The past is real, but God's act of rescue is greater. The courtroom is transformed from a place of condemnation to a stage for redemption. The accuser's power is broken. The judge's word is final. Grace interrupts the cycle of shame. The story pivots from despair to hope. God's declaration changes everything. The accused is no longer defined by his past. The next act is about restoration. The verdict is not what anyone expected. With Satan silenced, God addresses Joshua directly. The filthy garments remain, but God commands, "Take off his filthy clothes." This is more than a change of outfit, it's a transformation of identity. God says, "See, I have taken away your sin." The removal of filth is a visible sign of an invisible reality: forgiveness. God does not clean Joshua, he replaces him. The man who stood condemned now stands chosen. The rags are gone. The shame is gone. The accusation has no evidence left to point at. This becomes the emotional center. Joshua does nothing to earn this. It's a gift of pure grace. This is the heart of the gospel. God removes our shame and clothes us in righteousness. The divine exchange is total, our filth for his finery. The past is stripped away, a new identity given. Joshua stands, not as a condemned sinner, but as a restored son. The transformation is immediate and complete. God's grace is not partial, it is lavish. The courtroom becomes a place of celebration. The accused is now honored. The story of shame becomes a story of restoration. This is what God does for all who come to him. The old is gone, the new has come, the verdict is grace, the sentence is freedom, the judge has spoken. Notice the order. God restores Joshua's dignity before giving him any task. Joshua hasn't proven himself or made promises, he simply receives grace. Zechariah, caught up in the vision, cries, "Put a clean turban on his head." The angels obey, completing Joshua's transformation. Only after Joshua is fully restored does God give him his commission. "If you walk in my ways, you will govern my house," God says. Acceptance comes before assignment. God's message: because you are accepted, now you can serve. Service is a response to grace, not a requirement for it. The world says, "Prove yourself, then you'll be valuable." God says, "You are valuable, now live out of that reality." Our identity is the foundation, not the reward. God gives us new clothes first, then invites us to walk in them. This is the upside-down logic of grace. Restoration always precedes responsibility. Joshua's restoration points to something even greater. God says, "I am going to bring my servant the branch." Joshua and his fellow priests are symbols of things to come. The branch is a prophetic image, a future king from David's line, a Messiah. Joshua's cleansing foreshadows a deeper cleansing the branch will bring. God promises, "I will remove the sin of this land in a single day." For Christians, the branch is Jesus, the one who, on the cross, dealt with sin once for all. The story moves from personal restoration to cosmic redemption. Joshua's story is a preview, the branch is the fulfillment. The gospel is not just for one man, but for all people, for all time. The promise is bigger than the courtroom, it's for the whole world. Grace is coming, and it will change everything. The vision points forward to hope for all. This isn't just Joshua's story, it's ours. We all know what it's like to stand accused, burdened by shame. Our filthy garments might be addiction, regret, secret sin, or deep insecurity. We try to clean ourselves up, but the stains remain. The voice of accusation haunts us, reminding us of our failures. We stand before God, knowing we have no defense. The accusations are true, we are broken and powerless to change ourselves. Left to our own devices, we're trapped in a cycle of shame and striving. Our garments affect how we see ourselves, others, and God. They keep us from freedom and joy. We wonder if grace could ever be for us. But Joshua's story shows there is hope. The courtroom of heaven is not closed to us. The good news is that God doesn't wait for us to clean ourselves up. While we stand in our filth, God steps in, just as he did for Joshua. He silences the accuser, not by denying our guilt, but by pointing to Jesus, the branch. The cross is God's eternal rebuke to every accusation. God says, "See, I have taken away your sin." Through faith in Jesus, our filthy garments are removed. Every stain, every failure, every secret shame is stripped away. In God's eyes, our record is clean. He clothes us in Christ's righteousness, a new identity, a new name. We are no longer defined by our past, but by His grace. We are beloved, forgiven children of God. This is not something we achieve, but something we receive. When the accuser points to our past, we point to the cross. Our hope is not in our ability to change, but in God's power to transform. He gives us a new name and a new identity. Our job is to live in that reality, to walk in the new clothes we've been given. The verdict is grace, the sentence is freedom. This is the gospel. The courtroom scene ends not with guilt, but with hope. The accused stands tall, clothed in splendor, the accuser silenced. God delights in exchanging our worst for His best. You are not your shame or your failures. You are a burning stick snatched from the fire, chosen and redeemed. God sees you clothed in righteousness, fully accepted and deeply loved. And the judge has the final word. When accusation rises, remember this scene. Heaven has already spoken. You are clothed in grace. Stand tall in the garments of grace. Walk in the freedom of forgiveness. Serve God not to earn His love but because you already have it. Let hope sink deep. Your past does not have the final say. Grace writes the last chapter. God's restoring love has the final word.